All right, so today we're going to do law of cosines. It's kind of similar to law of sines in that you use it for a non-right triangle. This is on page 37 in your booklet. You only use law of cosines if you have side angle side or side side side. So you don't have to memorize these formulas. We'll be giving those to you on quizzes and tests. If you don't have side angle side or side side side, then you're going to use law of sines. So on our review day when we see a mix of law of sines and law of cosines problems, you do have to choose which one to use. So for today, we're just doing law of cosines. All right, so we'll refer back to this chart. But if you look at problem number 1 on the next page, look at what you have. So we have side, angle, side. We do have the angle in between the two sides. So this is side, angle, side. That tells us we are allowed to use law of cosines. All right, so now there's 3 equations. Which one do we use? Since we're given angle B, we're going to use the equation that has the B in it at the beginning. So I'm just going to copy it down. And then I'm going to fill in any numbers that we have. So remember, lowercase letters refer to sides. I don't know side B, but I know side A is 5. Side C is 13. And then A again is 5. C is 13. And cosine of angle B is 95 degrees. All right, so from here on out, it's just plug it in your calculator. Do it all at one time. So 5 squared plus 13 squared minus 2 times 5 times 13 times cosine 95. Do not try to simplify each part individually. So when you get that answer, you get 205.33. I'm just going to say dot, dot, dot. Now, that's not my b. That's b squared. So how do I find b? I have to take the square root of that. So make sure that you realize that 205 is not actually my missing side. Okay, so now you're going to do, what's the square root of that answer? So now I know side B is 14.3. All right, so now if we start with law of cosines, let's just finish with law of cosines. So we need to find either angle A or angle C, so it doesn't matter which one. So now to find an angle, you're going to switch over to one of these formulas. So let's just find angle A and write down the formula. Cosine of A equals b squared plus c squared minus a squared over 2bc. All right, so let's fill in our numbers. B is 14.3. We just found that out. So 14.3 squared plus 13 squared minus 5 squared over 2 times 14.3 times 13. All right, so now when you put this in your calculator, I'm going to do the numerator first just to get one answer. So 14.3 squared plus 13 squared minus 5 squared. That gives me 348.49 over 2 times 14.3 times 13. 371.8. Now that's not actually angle A, that's cosine of angle A. So remember from a few days ago, if you're finding your angle, you do inverse cosine. So we're doing inverse cosine of 348.49 divided by 371.8. All right, so angle A is 20.4 degrees. Now, you could use law of cosines again, but that would be kind of silly because all we know is 2 angles, and if we know 2 angles, you could just subtract from 180. So I would do 180 minus 95 minus 20.4. And that gives you your missing angle. So once you find 2 angles, just subtract from 180 to get your last angle. And now you're all done with finding all your angles and all your sides. All right, problem 2. What are we given? Side, side, side. So that is something we can use law of cosines for. Side, side, side. So we're going to pick any angle. I always like to start with the biggest angle. So if you look at side A being the biggest side, we're going to just start with angle A. So I'm going to use this formula. Okay, so remember you can always flip back so you don't have to memorize the formulas. All we do is we fill in everything we know. So cosine of A equals 10 squared plus 7 squared minus 12 squared over 2 times 10 times 7. Okay, so we type this in our calculator, 10 squared plus 7 squared minus 12 squared. That gives me 5, so cosine of A equals 5 over 2 times 10 times 7 is 140. All right, so remember, if you want to find an angle, you do inverse cosine of 5 over 140. All right, and we get angle A to be 87.95, which really rounds up to 88.0. All right, so I need to use law of cosines one more time. I'm going to find just angle B just because that's next. Okay, so if I want to find angle B, I'm going to use the cosine of B formula. A squared plus C squared minus B squared over 2AC. So we have cosine of B equals 12 squared plus 7 squared minus 10 squared over 2 times A times C. All right, so when you type this in your calculator, do the numerator first. 12 squared plus 7 squared minus 10 squared. That gives me 93 over 2 times 12 times 7, which is 168. So now I'm going to do inverse cosine of 93 divided by 168. That gives me angle B to be 56.4 degrees. All right, so angle B is 56.4 degrees. I'm going to fill that in. Notice now I've got two of my angles. So how do I find the missing third angle? Just subtract from 180. 180 minus 88 minus 56.4. And that gives me 35.6. Okay, so now I have all of my sides, all of my angles labeled, and I'm all done. All right, last problem. Set up a triangle, call it ABC, and then fill in the information. Angle A is 21, side B is 20, side C is 14. So what do you have? You have side, angle, side. So that tells me to use one of these equations. Which angle do I have? I have angle A, so I'm going to use the one that has A squared at the beginning. So I'm just going to copy my equation down and fill in all the information. So A squared is equal to 20 squared plus 14 squared minus 2 times 20 times 14 times cosine of 21. All right, so now that you have the equation filled in, just type it in your calculator. Put the whole thing in. Don't try to simplify each part. All right, so that gives me A squared is equal to 73.19 dot, dot, dot. But that's not A, so I'm not rounding it. I have to take the square root of that answer. That gives me side A, so that's 8.6. All right, so now that I have that, I'm going to do law of cosines again to find an angle. If I want to find an angle, I need to either find angle B or angle C, so I'm just going to go in order. Doesn't matter which one you find next. So cosine of B equals A squared plus C squared minus B squared over 2AC. All right, so I'm going to fill in 8.6 squared plus 14 squared minus 20 squared all over 2 times 8.6 times 14. All right, so now I'm going to get out my calculator. 8.6 squared plus 14 squared minus 20 squared gives me negative 130.04. 2 times 8.6 times 14 gives me 240.8. Now that's not angle B, that's cosine of B. So remember, if you're finding an angle, you want to do inverse cosine of negative 130.04 divided by 240.8. So that tells me that angle B is 122.7. All right, so now I've found out angle B, 122.7. I have two angles, so just take 180 minus 122.7 minus 21, and that gives you your third angle, which is 36.3 degrees. And again, if you ever want to double check to see that you're doing it right, here's my largest side. That's across from my largest angle. My smallest side was 8.6. That's across from my smallest angle. So I probably did the problem right. And then you're all done.